This tutorial is going to cover the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula works for when you have quadratic functions in standard form. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c is standard form. So what is the quadratic formula then? It's this. Now, the quadratic formula, the way that it works is it's trying to give you the roots, in other words, the solutions, and also x-intercepts. So all quadratic functions have one of three possibilities for their solutions. The first one is when a quadratic function doesn't touch the x-axis at all. As you notice, this orange parabola is above the x-axis and is all positive. Therefore, I will have no solutions. Another option is if I were to have a parabola that only touches my x-axis at its vertex, this guy right here. So if that happens, then there's only one solution because that graph will only touch my x-axis once. And last but not least, if we happen to have a parabola that intersects my x-axis two times, then this would have two solutions and we have to find both of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a couple examples, and we're going to refer back to these pages, and we're going to see exactly how to use this quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and get started on our first example. Okay, so here is our first example, and before I do anything with this, notice that this equation is not equal to 0. We have to fix that. We cannot solve a quadratic function with the quadratic formula without this being equal to 0. So in order to do this, I'm going to add 6x to both sides here. And at the same time, I'm also going to add 7 to cancel out this 7. All right. So all of this cancels on the right-hand side, so this is now equal to 0. And the 2x squared I'm going to bring down, the plus 6x I'm going to bring down, as well as the plus 7. Now we want to make sure that we go through this and label our A, B, and C's appropriately. So we'll go ahead and denote the A term in this lovely blue color. And B is going to be the 6, which means that 7 is going to be my C. So remember from the quadratic formula, let me show it to you again real quick. I'm just going to turn the pages back. There's the second page. Here it is. So we want to follow this formula the very best that we can so that we can get to our no solutions, one solution, or two solutions. So let's go back to our example, and I am going to go ahead and start this off by saying x equals. Remember that these are x-intercepts. They're the solutions to my function. So the first thing that I have is negative b. And in this case, my b happens to be a positive 6. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the negative b with the 6 there. And now I have a plus or a minus. And I'll show you what that means in just a second, once we get to the end. And now we have to take the square root of a whole bunch of business. So inside here is going to be b squared, which would be 6 squared. And then we have minus 4 times a times c, whatever that is. So I'm just going to leave those open for right now, and let's find my b and c terms. So a would be the 2, and my c term would be the 7. So that's going to be all over 2 times whatever a is, which in this case is 2. So that's the setup of this problem. The only thing that we have to worry about now, which is a pretty big worry, is making sure that we compute this correctly. And I have my own method for doing this to where I rarely make mistakes from it at all, and you have to find your own way too. So if you like my way, you're welcome to use it. If it doesn't work out like you planned, or if it's confusing to you, you can find a different way on your own. So the negative b part here, this negative 6, I'm just going to bring down, so negative 6. The plus or minus will stay, and the way that I do this under the radical is I do it in two parts. I'll do the squaring part as one of my parts, and then I'll multiply out my 4 times its a times its c. So the 6 squared is 36 minus, and at this point I'm going to look through my a and c terms, this 4 times 2 times 7, to make sure that there are no other negative numbers. Because if there were, this minus sign after the 36 would have to become positive. So you want to be really careful about that. Chances are if you make a mistake on these kinds of problems, this is where it's going to happen. So let's be super careful. So 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 7 is 56. And this is all being divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so now it's time to simplify a little bit farther. So I'm going to have my 6 plus or minus, which gives me a negative 20. So there's a negative under the radical, so we're going to have imaginary numbers. This is all over 4 still. And I know that 20 can be broken down into a perfect square factor. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to bring out the square root of the negative 1 part first, which would just be an I. And 20 is the same thing as 4 times 5. Notice that 4 is a perfect square. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to get to cross this out and write a 2 in front of that I. That's really nice that I can do that. And then my denominator is still 4. So this is going to clean up quite a bit. We are going to have 6 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 5 all over 4. Now, at this point in time, you could leave your answer like this, but there are still some more things that we could do to simplify it just a little bit more. Notice that the 6, the 2, and the 4 are all divisible by 2. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So this would become a 3. This would just go away because 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then this would turn into a 2. So we are going to rewrite this as 3 plus or minus I times the square root of 5 all over 2. So the way that we have this written, some of you may think that that's just one solution, but this is in fact 2 different solutions, which I will show you how to get in the next page. And I'm going to show you one way up here and one way right over here. So I'm going to turn the page. And notice that I have 2 different things going on here. This first problem up here has the plus sign with it, and the one below is the one with the minus sign. And that's all that plus or minus means. It means you have to check both of them for solutions. And the way that these are written right now would actually be acceptable to turn in as they are as a solution. But if you wanted to rewrite them out so that it's more of the form a plus bi without a fraction, it's not that hard to do. So I'm going to walk you through it if you want to see. So this can be the same thing as 3 halves, because that's being divided by the 2. So I have to do this first. And then I could say plus, and this is where this part kind of gets a little weird, but there is a 1 right here before the I. So that would just be 1i times the square root of 5. Or in other words, we could say it is 1/2 times I square roots of 5. And this is actually not very pretty for me to look at, much less probably you. So if you want to leave your answer in this way, you are welcome to. So the one in the the one down here, this guy right here, would look the exact same way, except with it being a plus, it would be a minus instead. So that's how you use the quadratic formula to come up with different solutions, and that concludes this tutorial.